From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Monday, January 27. Marcia Langton, one of Australia's most eminent historians and Aboriginal leaders, has accused university leadership of allowing anti-Semitism to flourish under the false cloak of academic freedom. That's an exclusive live now at theaustralian.com.au. The federal government is overhauling the rules to bring in thousands of registered nurses from the UK, Ireland, the US, Canada, Singapore and Spain, dramatically slashing wait times to transfer their qualifications. Big smiles and a show of defiance from 4 young women, Israeli soldiers kidnapped by Hamas on October 7 and freed over the weekend as part of the Middle East's fragile peace, a trade in human beings, as Hamas releases hostages and Israel frees Palestinian prisoners. Today we look at the fate of Naama Levy, who was 19 when she was seized by Hamas in harrowing scenes from her military base in southern Israel. She was wearing blood-stained grey tracksuit pants that became an emblem of contested claims about sexual violence. In Palestine Square in Gaza City, a gleaming white Hyundai station wagon pulls up. Surrounding it is a thick group of men in black or camouflage. All their faces are concealed. They wear green Hamas bandanas. Some are carrying AK-47s. Others hold cameras. There's a crowd of people surrounding the square, cheering. And then from the car step 4 Israeli soldiers, young women aged 19 and 20. Karina Ariev, Daniela Gilboa, Liri Albag and Naama Levy. They look fresh and clean. They're wearing military-style khaki uniforms. Each girl has her long dark hair swept back from her face. And as the crowd of Palestinians reaches a roar and the girls are marched onto a makeshift stage adorned with Palestinian flags and Hamas banners with slogans like "Gaza is the graveyard of the criminal Zionists," something remarkable is happening. The young women are beaming. They're waving and smiling to the crowd, to the representatives of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who have kept them hostage for 477 days and who are handing them over to the Red Cross. It's a deliberate show of power. These young women, they will later tell Israeli media, are not going to cower or cringe, despite the ordeal of captivity they've endured. Karina, Daniela, Liri and Naama are holding their heads high. We showed them on the stage that we were not fazed, one of the women told their families in a report on Israeli station Can TV. It had no impact on us. We are stronger than them. Back in Israel, watching the live footage, the girls' parents know what they're seeing. Footage released by the Israeli Defence Forces shows the parents laughing and pointing with delight at their girls' show of strength. And a few hours later, the girls leap back into their parents' arms in an Israeli hospital, their hair freshly washed, wearing civilian clothes. It's a scene the families have been dreaming of since the girls were kidnapped on October 7, 2023. In shocking scenes captured by Hamas fighters of the young women wearing civilian clothes, including what looked like pyjamas, being cable-tied and forced up against a wall inside their base on October 7. Naama Levy pleads, "I have friends in Palestine." Liri Albag asks for the men to speak English.
I have friends in Palestine. Someone who speaks English.
Subsequent videos show the women being loaded into what seem to be Israeli army vehicles to be taken into Gaza. Another video shows Naama Levy being transferred into a jeep.
You can see a barefoot woman pulled from the trunk of a jeep by a gunman and then forced into the back seat of a car. Her face is bleeding and her wrists appear to be cable-tied behind her back.
Naama is wearing a black t-shirt and pale grey tracksuit pants, as in the earlier videos. But in this scene, the back of her pants is dark, with what could be bloodstaining. This image caused huge concern in Israel and beyond that Naama and the other women held by Hamas were being sexually assaulted. It also fed into something that became a raging argument in places like social media, as the world reacted to the horror of October 7 and the devastation that came after, as Israel acted out its vow to destroy Hamas. Israel accused Hamas fighters of raping and sexually torturing women in the October 7 attack. That triggered denials and conspiracy theories, claims that stories of sexual violence were all Israeli propaganda. And in the middle of all that, Naama Levy's bloody track pants were freighted with meaning.
Rape is not resistance. Rape is not resistance. Rape is not...
Over the past 15 months, women around the world have demonstrated by holding up pictures of Naama, captioned, "Don't look away."
Let them go. Let them go. Me too, unless you're a Jew. Me too, unless you're a Jew.
And by dressing as Naama, wearing a black t-shirt and grey tracksuit pants, stained with dark red, at marches and demonstrations including in the US, Canada, France and in the UK. In August, a 20-foot replica of Naama's grey stained pants was erected outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Yoni Bashan is a senior journalist with The Australian, and he's reported from Israel and Gaza over the past 15 months. Yoni, what was it about Naama, of all the people who were taken hostage on that day, that made her story resonate around the world?
Well, I think it was the image of Naama Levy that really crystallised the type of barbarism that we saw on October 7. I mean, there are many images that arise out of that awful day. And one might think of the scenes of another hostage, Noah Argamani, who has since been freed, and the photographs and footage of her being loaded on the back of a motorbike and taken into Gaza. But really, it's the images of Naama Levy, a young girl of 19 who was seen being basically dragged by the hair out of a car, appearing to have had her Achilles heel cut so she couldn't run away, and really the sight of her soiled clothing that seemed to suggest the nightmarish possibility that she'd already been attacked and abused. And it really felt to people watching that it was a taste of what these poor hostages were likely to endure for however long they would remain in captivity.
What did you make of that very stage-managed scene in Palestine Square in Gaza City?
Well, I was certainly heartened to see them looking reasonably well and smiling and giving thumbs up for the cameras, but I was well aware in my mind that this is a highly stage-managed affair, and we know from other hostages who've been released that in the lead-up to being handed back to Israel, they were fed correctly, they were treated better, they were given better clothing. And once they arrived back in Israel and granted interviews to media outlets and spoke to people close to them, we know how they were treated in captivity, and it was terrible. And it varied for each of the hostages. Some of them were held underground, some of them had been murdered underground, and some were held captive in the homes of certain individuals who are either aligned directly with Hamas or affiliated with the terrorist group loosely. But what I would say is that looking at that stage-managed and quite grotesque affair of having these 4 young women paraded before a crowd and put on a stage and seen to be smiling and seen to be joyful, I wouldn't trust any of it, nor would I suggest to anyone that they draw anything from that. I mean, we really need to hear from these hostages what they went through, and in all likelihood, what they went through was the worst experience that anyone could go through in that scenario.
Coming up after the break, what did the women go through and what happens next in this prisoner swap? The Australian Open is over after thrilling men's and women's finals. You can read the latest from our correspondents at Melbourne Park right now at theaustralian.com.au. And we'll be back after the break. Reports are starting to emerge about what Karina, Daniela, Liri and Naama went through in captivity. According to Israeli media, the women have told family and friends they were held in domestic dwellings and were frequently moved and had gone for lengthy periods without food. They said they'd been ordered to cook and clean for the families holding them captive. One said she'd been held in a tunnel alone. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, an IDF spokesman, said Israel was gravely concerned about some of the civilians still being held in Gaza.
Hamas failed to meet its obligations to first release Israeli female civilian hostages as part of the agreement.
This ceasefire deal was supposed to be that Hamas would release civilian women and children before soldiers. In return, Israel is releasing Palestinian prisoners in tranches of hundreds at a time. In return for the 4 soldiers, Israel released 200 Palestinians, who were welcomed by jubilant crowds in the city of Khan Yunis. But some of the most famous hostages, the Bibas family, Father Yarden, Mother Shiri, toddler Ariel and baby Kafir, have not been released. And now the Bibas family is terrified that Shiri and her children are dead, a fear enhanced by Daniel Hagari's words.
We are determined to return to the return of Arbel Yahud, an Israeli citizen kidnapped from Nir Oz, and also Shiri Bivas and her 2 children, Kfir and Ariel, whose welfare we are extremely concerned about.
Along with Shiri, there are 2 more female hostages supposed to be freed in this round, Arbel Yahud and another soldier, Agam Berger. A Hamas official has told reporters Arbel Yahud, a 29-year-old from the kibbutz Nir Oz, is alive and will be released next Saturday. Palestinian Islamic Jihad claims she is a soldier, but her family and the Israeli government say she is not. Until she is released, Israel says it won't allow Palestinians to return to the northern Gaza Strip, which it pounded with artillery and a land invasion after October 7. For its part, Hamas claims Israel is breaching its end of the deal and accuses Israel of firing on Palestinians attempting to return to the north. In total, Hamas has agreed to release 33 hostages in this first phase, including women, children, the elderly, and wounded men. The first week of the deal, with 7 hostages now released, is over. Now, 3 hostages per week are due to be released over the coming 4 weeks, with 14 to be freed in the final 6th week of the first phase. Concern is growing in Israel that some of the remaining hostages are dead, and Hamas isn't saying either way. It's a public holiday Monday across Australia, but if you've had enough pavlova and sunbathing, you can escape to Australia's best news and analysis anytime at theaustralian.com.au.